The one who created her disappeared, and I held her hand for 20 years.
The phone rang at 2:47 a.m., cutting through the silence like a rusty blade. I'd been lying awake anyway, staring at the water stain on our bedroom ceiling that looked like a middle finger. Seemed appropriate, considering how life had been treating me lately. Dana was beside me, breathing that deep, satisfied sleep of someone whose conscience never kept them up at night. Lucky her. "Dad?" Sophie's voice cracked through the receiver, and my chest went cold. "Dad, we're in trouble. There's been an accident. Mom picked up some guy at the bar, and now there are cops everywhere, and there's a mess, and where are you?" I was already pulling on my jeans, my heart hammering against my ribs like it was trying to escape. "Route 9, near the old quarry. Dad, hurry. They're putting Mom in an ambulance." The drive took 12 minutes that felt like 12 hours. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight I thought I might snap it in half. Dana had been working late again. Third time this week. Working late at Murphy's bar, apparently. Real professional. The scene looked like something out of a disaster movie. Red and blue lights painted the asphalt in sick colors. An ambulance sat with its back doors open, paramedics working over a stretcher. A black sedan was wrapped around a telephone pole like a metal pretzel, steam rising from its crushed hood. I spotted Sophie first, sitting in the back of a patrol car with a blanket around her shoulders. Her face was pale as moonlight, a small cut on her forehead already bandaged. She looked up when she saw me, and the relief in her eyes nearly broke me. "Sir, you can't—" A young cop tried to block my path. "That's my daughter and my wife." I pushed past him, not caring about protocol. Detective Linda Grady appeared at my elbow. We'd gone to high school together back when she was just Linda Morrison, and I thought I had the world figured out. Now she wore a badge and the kind of hard expression that came from seeing too much of humanity's worst. "Jack," she touched my arm. "Your wife's alive, but it's serious. Head trauma, and there may be internal injuries. They're taking her to St. Mary's." "What happened?" I looked at the wreckage, trying to piece together the physics of disaster. Near as we can tell, she was driving with a passenger. Male, mid-30s. They hit the pole at about 50 miles per hour. Your daughter was in the back seat. Seatbelt saved her life. I walked over to Sophie, my legs feeling like they were made of wet concrete. She threw her arms around me, and I could smell fear sweat and something else, something that made my stomach turn. "Dad, I tried to tell her not to drive. She'd been drinking, and that guy, he was all over her, and she was laughing, and—" The words tumbled out in a rush. "What guy?" I looked back at Linda. "Where is he?" Linda's face went carefully neutral. "He's in custody. Calvin Ames. We found illegal substances in his jacket and a .38 in the glove compartment. Both illegal, considering his record." "His record?" "Jack." Linda's voice dropped. "You might want to sit down for this." But I was already walking toward the ambulance, where they were loading Dana onto a stretcher. Her face was a mess of bruises and dark streaks, her expensive blonde hair matted and soaked. She looked small, fragile, nothing like the sharp-tongued woman who'd been cutting me down to size for the past 5 years. "Is she going to make it?" I asked the paramedic. "We're doing everything we can." "Are you the husband?" "Yeah, I'm the husband." The words tasted like ashes. As the ambulance pulled away, sirens wailing, I noticed Linda still watching me with that cop look. The one that said, she knew something I didn't, and I wasn't going to like it. "Linda, who is Calvin Ames?" She pulled out a small notebook, flipped through a few pages. "Calvin Thomas Ames, age 37. 3 arrests for assault, 2 for possession with intent to distribute, 1 for armed robbery. Did 18 months in Thomaston. Got out last year." She looked up at me. "Jack, your wife's been bailing him out. Financially, I mean. We found receipts in her purse." The world tilted sideways. I grabbed onto the patrol car's hood to steady myself. "That's not possible. Dana doesn't know any criminals. She's a lawyer, for Christ's sake." "Yeah, well, apparently she knows this one pretty well. The bartender at Murphy's says they've been meeting there twice a week for months. Always the same table in the back corner." Sophie was crying now, quiet tears that she tried to hide by looking down. I wanted to comfort her, but my own world was crumbling faster than I could process it. "Dad," she whispered, "there's something else. Something I should have told you a long time ago, Saint." Mary's hospital smelled like industrial disinfectant and broken dreams. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry wasps, casting everything in a sickly green pallor. Dana was in surgery, had been for 3 hours. Sophie and I sat in the waiting room, surrounded by vending machines that hummed and clicked like mechanical vultures. "Tell me," I said finally. "Whatever it is, just tell me." Sophie twisted her hands in her lap. At 20, she looked like a little girl again, lost and scared. "Mom's been seeing men for years, Dad. Not just Calvin, others, lots of others." The words hit me like physical blows. "How long have you known?" "Since I was 16, maybe earlier. I'd come home from school and find them in the living room, or I'd see texts on her phone when she left it lying around. She always said they were clients, but clients don't usually—" She stopped, her face flushing red. "Don't usually what?" "Don't usually have their hands all over her. Don't usually stay for dinner when you're working late. Don't usually leave their underwear in the guest bathroom." I felt something cold and hard settling in my chest, like a tumor made of ice. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I thought you knew. I thought you were just pretending not to notice. Like maybe that's what married people did." Tears started fresh down her cheeks. "And then when I got older, I realized you really didn't know. And I didn't know how to tell you without destroying everything." A doctor in green scrubs approached us, his face professionally neutral. "Mr. Halverson, your wife is stable. The surgery went well, but she's in a medically induced coma. We need to monitor the brain swelling. When will she wake up? Hard to say. Could be days, could be weeks. Brain injuries are unpredictable." After he left, I sat there staring at the industrial carpet, trying to process everything. My wife of 22 years was a serial cheater. My daughter had been carrying this burden for years. And now Dana was lying unconscious 3 floors above us, her secret safe in her damaged skull. "There's more, isn't there?" I asked Sophie. She nodded miserably. "Uncle Tom knows. About the men, I mean. I saw him talking to Mom about it last Christmas. They were in the kitchen, and he was telling her she needed to be more careful, that you were getting suspicious." "Tom. My younger brother, the golden boy, the successful lawyer who'd always made me feel like the family screw-up. Tom knew my wife was cheating and said nothing." "What exactly did he say?" "Something about how you'd been asking questions about Mom's schedule, and she laughed and said you were too trusting to figure it out. Then Tom said—" Sophie's voice dropped to a whisper. "He said maybe it was time to tell you the truth about everything." "What truth?" "I don't know. They stopped talking when they saw me." I pulled out my phone and scrolled through Dana's contact list. She'd left her purse in the car during the accident, and the cops had given it to me along with her other personal effects. Her phone was cracked, but functional, and she'd never bothered to put a password on it. Trusting Dana, always so confident that no one would dare invade her privacy. The text messages told a story I wished I'd never learned to read. Calvin wasn't the only one. There was Marcus, a contractor who'd worked on our kitchen last year. There was David, her paralegal. There was someone listed only as Wednesday Guy with a string of messages that made my stomach turn, but it was the photos that really destroyed me. Dana in positions I hadn't seen her in for years, with men I'd never met in places I didn't recognize. Years of documentation of her double life stored carelessly on a phone she left lying around the house every day. "Dad?" Sophie was watching my face. "What is it?" I showed her the phone. She looked at it for maybe 10 seconds before pushing it away. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry you had to find out like this." "How many people knew?" "I don't know. Some of her friends, maybe. Uncle Tom, obviously. The bartender at Murphy's seemed to know Calvin pretty well. I thought about all the dinner parties, all the family gatherings, all the times I'd felt like people were sharing some private joke I wasn't part of. Turns out they were. The joke was me." My phone buzzed. Text message from Tom. "Heard about the accident. Is Dana okay? Do you need anything?" I stared at the message for a long time. My brother, pretending to be concerned, pretending he didn't know exactly what kind of accident this was and why it had happened. I texted back, "She's alive. We need to talk." His response came immediately. "Of course. Whatever you need. Whatever I need." What I needed was to never have married Dana Kowalski 22 years ago. What I needed was to have paid attention to the signs instead of working 60-hour weeks to pay for her law school and her clothes and her car and her lifestyle. What I needed was a time machine and a baseball bat. What I had was a cheating wife in a coma, a daughter who'd been protecting me from the truth for years, and a brother who'd been protecting my wife from the consequences. "Sophie," I said, "I want you to go stay with your friend Jessica for a few days." "Dad, no. I want to stay with you. This is going to get ugly, really ugly, and I don't want you caught in the middle of it." She shook her head firmly. "I've been in the middle of it for 4 years. I'm not abandoning you now." Looking at her, I realized that somewhere along the way, my little girl had become the strongest person in our family. While I was working, and Dana was cheating, Sophie had been holding everything together through sheer force of will. "Okay," I said, "but when this gets bad, and it will get bad, you tell me if you want out." "It won't get worse than it already is," she said. She was wrong about that. It was about to get much, much worse. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. My boss, Jerry, didn't ask questions. Small-town gossip travels faster than bad news, and everyone had already heard about the accident. What they didn't know yet was the rest of the story. But they would, soon enough. I sat in my kitchen, surrounded by Dana's belongings, trying to piece together the scope of her deception. Her laptop was password protected, but she'd written the password on a sticky note inside her desk drawer. Sophie 2003. The year our daughter was born. Even her security measures were sentimental lies. The laptop told me everything I needed to know, and a lot I wished I didn't. Email chains with her girlfriends discussing her adventures, calendar entries for meetings that were clearly not business-related, and bank statements that showed a pattern of cash withdrawals I'd never questioned because I'd trusted her to manage our finances. $15,000 over the past 6 months, withdrawn in small amounts from our joint account. Money I'd earned working overtime, money I'd thought was going towards Sophie's college fund or Dana's student loans or our retirement. Instead, it had been funding her affairs, hotel rooms, dinners, gifts for men who weren't her husband. My phone rang, Tom's name on the caller ID. "Jack, I'm so sorry about Dana. How is she?" "She's in a coma, but you probably already knew that." Silence on the other end. Then, "What do you mean?" "I mean, you knew she was cheating, Tom. Sophie told me about the conversation at Christmas." More silence. I could practically hear him calculating his response. "Jack, I think you're upset and confused. Maybe we should talk in person." "Yeah, maybe we should. How about you come over here right now?" "I can't. I'm in court all day, but maybe this evening." "Tom, come over here now, or I'm going to start making some very public phone calls about what I found on Dana's laptop." 20 minutes later, my brother was sitting at my kitchen table, looking like he'd aged 5 years overnight. Tom had always been the handsome one, the successful one, the one our parents bragged about at family dinners. Now he just looked tired and guilty. "How long have you known?" I asked without preamble. "Jack, this isn't the time." "How long?" He rubbed his face with both hands. "A couple of years, maybe 3, and you said nothing." What was I supposed to say? "Hey, Jack, your wife is sleeping around? You seemed happy. You never asked questions about her schedule or her friends or where she was spending money." Because I trusted her. Because I'm an idiot who thought his wife was actually working late and his brother actually cared about him. Tom leaned back in his chair, and for the first time, I saw something that looked like anger flash across his face. "You want to know the truth, Jack? The real truth? You ignored her for years. You worked all the time. You never took her anywhere. You never bought her anything nice. What did you think was going to happen?" "I worked to pay for her law school. I worked to pay for this house and her car and Sophie's private school and everything else she wanted. I worked so she could have the life she said she wanted. But you didn't give her attention. You didn't make her feel wanted." "So it's my fault she's been screwing half the county?" Tom stood up, pacing to the window. "It's not about fault, Jack. It's about reality. Dana's a beautiful, intelligent woman. She has needs." "Stop." I held up my hand. "Just stop talking before I do something we'll both regret." But Tom kept going, and I realized he wasn't just defending Dana, he was defending himself. "She tried to make it work with you. She really did. But you were never there, emotionally or physically. You treated her like a roommate, not a wife." "How would you know how I treated her?" "Because she talked to me about it. Because she was lonely and frustrated, and she needed someone to listen to her." Something in his tone sent a chill down my spine. "Tom, please tell me you didn't." He wouldn't meet my eyes. "It wasn't supposed to happen." The words hit me like a physical blow. I stood up so fast my chair fell backward. "You slept with my wife. It was 1 time, maybe 2. It didn't mean anything." "When? Does it matter?" "When, Tom?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Your wedding night." The world went completely silent. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, could feel my hands starting to shake. "My wedding night? You passed out drunk in the hotel room. She was crying. Said she felt abandoned on the most important day of her life. I was just trying to comfort her. And it happened. And the second time? Sophie's first birthday party. You were outside grilling, and Dana was in the kitchen, and she was talking about how lonely she felt, how you never touched her anymore, and I hit him. My fist connected with his jaw before I even realized I was moving. He stumbled backward, knocking over a chair, a red line forming on his split lip. Get out, I said quietly. Jack, let me explain. Get out! He left without another word, and I stood alone in my kitchen, surrounded by the wreckage of my life. My wife was a serial cheater. My brother had betrayed me on my wedding night. And somewhere in all of this, there was more. I could feel it, like a splinter working its way deeper under my skin. I picked up Dana's phone and scrolled through her contacts again, looking for patterns I'd missed. Most of the names meant nothing to me, but there were a few that made me pause. Dr. Martinez, Sophie's pediatrician when she was little. Why would Dana have been texting with him? The messages were from 2 years ago, but they were strange. Clinical discussions about compatibility and genetic markers. Not the kind of thing you'd expect between a lawyer and a doctor, unless... I grabbed my laptop and started researching paternity tests. What I found made my hands shake so badly I could barely type. Dr. Martinez specialized in genetic testing, and according to his website, he offered discreet paternity testing services. The room started spinning. I sat down hard in my chair and tried to breathe. Sophie's medical records listed her as O negative. Mine were A positive. Dana's were B positive. I'd never thought about it before, never had reason to, but now I needed to know the truth. All of it. I drove to Dr. Martinez's office like a man possessed, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. The receptionist tried to tell me he was with a patient, but something in my face must have convinced her to make an exception. Dr. Martinez was a small, nervous man in his 50s who kept adjusting his glasses and wouldn't quite meet my eyes. He knew why I was there before I said a word. Mr. Halverson, I was wondering when you might come see me. You ran a paternity test on my daughter 2 years ago. It wasn't a question, and he didn't pretend it was. He pulled a file from his desk drawer. He'd been expecting this conversation. Your wife requested the test. She said she needed to know for medical reasons, family history concerns. And? He handed me a sheet of paper. The technical language was dense, but the conclusion was clear enough. Probability of paternity, 0%. I stared at the paper until the words blurred together. Sophie isn't my daughter. Biologically, no, I'm sorry. Who is the father? The test only compared her DNA to yours. To determine paternity with someone else, we'd need their sample. But I already knew. The timeline, Tom's guilt, the way he'd always been especially close to Sophie, the way our parents had always commented on how much she looked like the Halverson side of the family. Not like me, like Tom. I drove home in a daze, the DNA results burning a hole in my jacket pocket. Sophie was at school, wouldn't be home for hours. The house felt like a mausoleum, full of 22 years of lies and false memories. I called my lawyer. Eddie Palumbo had been disbarred in Massachusetts for ethics violations and had relocated to Maine to start over. He wasn't the most reputable attorney in town, but he was smart, ruthless, and he owed me a favor from when I'd helped him fix his furnace last winter. Jack, how's Dana? Heard about the accident. Eddie, I need to divorce my wife, and I need to destroy her financially and professionally in the process. How fast can you make that happen? Silence on the other end, then, Jesus, Jack, what happened? I told him everything. The affairs, the money, Calvin Ames, Tom's betrayal, the paternity test. By the time I finished, Eddie was whistling low under his breath. This is a nuclear bomb, Jack. You sure you want to detonate it? I'm sure. Okay. First thing we do is freeze all joint accounts. Then we file for divorce on grounds of adultery with a request for emergency spousal support termination. The criminal association with Ames gives us grounds to argue she's a flight risk and a danger to marital assets. What about Sophie? Legally, you're her father regardless of biology. You've been her primary support for 20 years. Unless she requests otherwise, custody shouldn't be an issue. And Tom? Eddie's voice turned cold. What about Tom? I want him to suffer too. Jack, I get it, but Tom's not your spouse. There's no legal remedy for your brother being a piece of crap. Then I'll find another remedy. After I hung up, I sat in my living room looking at family photos that now felt like evidence of fraud. Sophie's graduation from high school, family vacations to the beach, Christmas mornings. All of it built on lies. But looking at Sophie's face in those pictures, I realized something that surprised me. I didn't love her any less. She was still my daughter in every way that mattered. The DNA didn't change 20 years of bedtime stories and scraped knees and proud moments at school plays. What it changed was my relationship with everyone else. My phone buzzed. Text from Tom. "We need to talk. There are things you don't understand." I texted back. "I understand enough. Stay away from me and stay away from Sophie." "Jack, she's—" I turned off my phone. Whatever he was about to say, I didn't want to hear it. Not yet. I had work to do first. I spent the rest of the afternoon going through Dana's belongings methodically, looking for anything that might be useful. What I found was a safety deposit box key hidden in her jewelry box, along with a bank statement from an account I'd never heard of. The account had been opened 3 years ago with a deposit of $50,000. Since then, there had been regular deposits and withdrawals, always in cash. The current balance was over $200,000. Money she'd been hiding from me. Money that should have been part of our marital assets. I also found something else. A life insurance policy on me that I'd never signed. A very expensive policy with Dana as the sole beneficiary. My hands started shaking again. The policy was dated 6 months ago, right around the time Dana had started asking me to go on more adventure trips. Hiking in remote areas, camping in places with no cell service. Activities that were completely out of character for both of us. I thought she was trying to reconnect with me. Turns out she might have been trying to end me. When Sophie came home from school, I was sitting at the kitchen table with all the evidence spread out in front of me like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle from heck. "Dad, what's all this?" I looked at my daughter, not my biological daughter, but mine in every way that counted, and tried to figure out how to explain that her entire life had been a lie. "Sit down, sweetheart. We need to talk." Sophie took the news better than I'd expected. She sat quietly while I explained about the paternity test, about Tom, about the hidden money and the insurance policy. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "So, Uncle Tom is my biological father?" "Yes." "And Mom's been stealing from us for years?" "Yes." "And she might have been planning to have you ended?" "It's possible." Sophie nodded slowly, processing it all. Then she looked up at me with eyes that were older than her 20 years. "You're still my dad." "I know, and you're still my daughter. What are we going to do?" Before I could answer, my phone rang. The hospital. Dana was awake. We drove to St. Mary's in silence, both of us lost in our own thoughts. I wasn't sure what I was going to say to my wife when I saw her, but I knew it wasn't going to be pleasant. Dana was propped up in her hospital bed, looking small and fragile with bandages wrapped around her head and an IV in her arm. When she saw us, her face lit up with what looked like genuine relief. "Jack! Sophie! Thank God you're here! I was so scared! Cut the act, Dana!" I pulled the DNA results from my pocket and dropped them on her bedside table. "We need to talk." Her face went pale as she looked at the papers. "Jack, I can explain." 20 years, Dana. 20 years of lies." Sophie moved to the far side of the room, giving us space but staying close enough to hear everything. I was grateful for her presence. She was the only honest person left in my family. "It's not what you think," Dana said weakly. "It's exactly what I think. You've been cheating on me for years. You've been stealing money from our joint accounts. You took out a life insurance policy on me without my knowledge, and Sophie isn't my daughter. She is your daughter. Biology doesn't matter. You're right. Biology doesn't matter. Sophie will always be my daughter, but you're done." I pulled out the divorce papers Eddie had prepared and set them on her bedside table next to the DNA results. "You're divorcing me now, while I'm in the hospital?" "I'm divorcing you because you're a lying, cheating thief who's been playing me for a fool for 2 decades. Dana's facade finally cracked. The sweet, vulnerable victim disappeared, replaced by the cold, calculating woman I was starting to realize had been there all along. "You think you're so smart, Jack? You think you figured it all out? You don't know anything." "I know about Calvin Ames. I know about the other men. I know about the money you've been hiding. I know about Tom." "Tom told you?" "Tom told me enough. The rest I figured out myself." She laughed, a bitter sound that didn't match her injuries. Poor Jack. Still clueless after all these years. Enlighten me. You want to know the truth? The real truth? Tom and I have been together since before I met you. You were never anything more than a convenient cover story. The words hit me like physical blows, but I kept my face neutral. Keep talking. Tom was married when we started dating. His wife was pregnant, and he couldn't afford a scandal. So when you asked me out, he told me to say yes. Keep you interested, keep you distracted while he figured out his situation. And then? And then his wife miscarried, and she left him, and we thought we could finally be together. But by then you'd proposed, and Tom's law practice was just getting started, and it seemed easier to just go through with it. So you married me as a favor to my brother. I married you because Tom asked me to. The plan was to divorce you after a year or two, but then I got pregnant with Sophie. And Tom thought it would look better if she had a stable home with a father who wasn't going anywhere. I looked over at Sophie, who was standing frozen by the window. Her face was a mask of shock and pain. So Tom is Sophie's father, and you've both been lying about it for 20 years. Tom's been supporting her this whole time. Where do you think the money for her private school came from? Her college fund. You make good money, Jack, but not that good. The pieces were falling into place now, creating a picture so ugly I could barely stand to look at it. The other man? Tom's idea. He said if I was going to be stuck married to you, I might as well enjoy myself, as long as I was discreet. Calvin Ames wasn't discreet. Calvin was a mistake. He was supposed to be a simple transaction. I helped him with some legal trouble. He helped me with some personal needs. But he got greedy, started demanding money, threatening to tell you everything if I didn't pay him. So you were paying him blackmail. I was managing a situation until he got drunk and decided to take me for a joyride to celebrate his latest payday. I stared at this woman I'd been married to for over 2 decades and realized I'd never known her at all. She was a complete stranger wearing my wife's face. There's one more thing, she said, and something in her tone sent a chill through me. The life insurance policy you found? That wasn't my idea either. Tom's? Tom's been getting impatient. 20 years is a long time to wait for your real life to start. He thought if something happened to you, an accident maybe, something that looked natural, we could finally be together without all the complications. Sophie made a small sound from across the room, like she'd been punched in the stomach. You were planning to end me. We were planning for contingencies. Tom said accidents happen all the time to men your age who work dangerous jobs and don't take care of themselves. I stood up, my hands shaking with rage. You're both insane. We're practical, and we would have been happy, all 3 of us. Sophie would have had her real father. I would have had the man I actually love, and you, well, you would have been at peace. Dad? Sophie's voice was small and scared. Can we go now? I looked at my daughter, regardless of what any DNA test said, and saw that she'd heard enough. We both had. We're done here, Dana. Don't try to contact us. Don't try to come home when they release you. As far as Sophie and I are concerned, you're already dead. As we walked toward the door, Dana called after us. Jack, you can't prove any of this. It's all just the ramblings of a woman with a head injury. No one will believe you. I turned back to her, and for the first time in this whole nightmare, I smiled. Actually, Dana, I've been recording this entire conversation. I held up my phone, showing the voice recorder app that had been running since we walked into the room. The look on her face was worth every moment of pain she'd put me through. The recording changed everything. Eddie played it for the district attorney, who immediately opened an investigation into Dana's hidden assets and her relationship with Calvin Ames. The insurance company flagged the policy as potentially fraudulent, and the State Bar Association launched an ethics inquiry that would likely end Dana's legal career. But I wasn't done yet. Tom had been calling and texting for days, trying to arrange a meeting. I'd ignored him until now, but it was time to finish this. I arranged to meet him at Murphy's Bar, the same place where Dana had been meeting her lovers. It seemed appropriate. He was already there when I arrived, sitting in a back corner booth, looking like he hadn't slept in days. He'd always been the handsome brother, but now he looked haggard and desperate. Jack, thank God. We need to talk about this situation. Situation? I sat down across from him. Is that what you're calling 20 years of betrayal? It's not what you think. Dana exaggerated things, made it sound worse than it was. So you didn't sleep with my wife on my wedding night? He couldn't meet my eyes. That was a mistake. We were both drunk and... And you didn't father my daughter and then let me raise her for 20 years without telling me the truth? I wanted to tell you. I tried to tell you multiple times, but Dana said it would destroy you, and Sophie was happy and you didn't plan to have me ended for the insurance money? What? No, that was all Dana's idea. I told her it was insane, that we couldn't, but you went along with it. You took out the policy. Tom's face crumpled. I was weak. I've been weak this whole time. Dana's always been able to make me do things I knew were wrong. So this is Dana's fault? Not entirely, but Jack, you have to understand, I've been in love with her since college, before you even met her. When you started dating her, it nearly ended me. So you decided to end me instead. I never wanted to hurt you. I just wanted to be with her. And Sophie, God, Jack. Sophie is my daughter, and I've missed 20 years of being her real father. Something snapped inside me. I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a whisper. Let me explain something to you, Tom. Sophie is my daughter. I raised her. I loved her. I was there for every scraped knee, every nightmare, every school play, every heartbreak. You were just the guy who disappeared after she was born. Jack, I'm not finished. You want to know what's going to happen now? You're going to lose everything. Your law practice, your reputation, your freedom if I can manage it. And Sophie, she never wants to see you again. You can't keep me from my daughter. Watch me. I stood up to leave, but Tom grabbed my arm. Jack, please, we're brothers. We can work this out. I looked down at his hand on my arm, then back at his face. We're not brothers anymore. I walked out of Murphy's bar and drove straight to Tom's office. His secretary tried to stop me, but I brushed past her and walked into his private office, where he was meeting with a client. Gentlemen, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I thought you should know that Tom here has been under investigation by the district attorney's office for insurance fraud and conspiracy to commit homicide. The client, a well-dressed businessman I recognized from around town, went pale. Tom, is this true? Tom had followed me into his office. Jack, you can't do this. Actually, I can. I have recordings of his wife confessing to their plan to end me for the insurance money. I'm sure the local newspaper would be very interested in the story. I left Tom's office with his client walking out behind me and his secretary staring at both of them in shock. By the end of the day, half the town would know that Tom Halverson was mixed up in something ugly. But I still wasn't done. I drove to the offices of the town newspaper and had a long conversation with the editor, a woman named Carol who'd gone to high school with both Tom and me. I gave her copies of the recordings, the DNA test results, the bank statements, and the insurance policy. This is going to destroy both of them, she said after listening to everything. That's the idea. What about Sophie? This will be hard on her too. Sophie's stronger than both of them combined. She'll be fine. The story ran on the front page 2 days later. Local lawyer and brother conspire in insurance fraud scheme. It had everything: adultery, betrayal, hidden money, attempted homicide. The kind of story that small towns never forget. Dana was arrested in her hospital bed on charges of insurance fraud and conspiracy. Tom was arrested at his office in front of 3 clients and his entire staff. Calvin Ames, already in jail, was charged as an accessory. But the real satisfaction came when I got the call from Eddie. Jack, you're not going to believe this. The hidden bank account? It turns out Dana's been skimming money from her law firm's client trust fund for years. The partners just figured it out, and they're pressing charges. She's looking at serious prison time. How serious? 10 to 15 years, if she's convicted on all counts. I hung up the phone and looked around my house. My house now, since Dana had been forced to sign over her interest as part of the divorce settlement. Sophie was in the kitchen making dinner, humming quietly to herself. She'd taken a semester off from college to help me get through everything, but she seemed happier than I'd seen her in years. Dad, she called, dinner's ready. We sat at the kitchen table, just the two of us, eating spaghetti and talking about her plans to go back to school in the fall. She wanted to study psychology, she said. She thought she might be good at helping people work through family problems. I think you'd be excellent at that, I told her. I've had a lot of practice. After dinner, we sat on the front porch watching the sunset. It was the first peaceful moment I'd had in months. Dad, do you think Mom and Uncle Tom will ever forgive us for destroying their lives? I thought about it for a moment. I don't know, and I don't care. Me neither. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, and I realized that despite everything, the lies, the betrayal, the pain, I was happier than I'd been in years. I had my daughter, I had my house, and I had the truth. Sometimes that's enough. Dana was sentenced to 12 years in prison. Tom lost his law license and got 5 years. Calvin Ames got 3 years on top of his existing sentence. And Sophie and I, we got our lives back.